Good morning, everyone. I am Debbie Hersman. I'm the chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. Many of you know that the NTSB is an independent federal investigatory agency. We're charged by the Congress with investigating accidents in all modes of transportation. We have a statutory responsibility to investigate every civil aviation accident in the U.S. In our major accident investigations, we often dispatch a team to the accident site and very often issue recommendations to prevent the accident from occurring again. The NTSB has investigated 22 accidents at the Reno Air Races in the last 30 years. And in that same period of time, over the last 30 years, we've investigated 45 accidents nationwide involving P-51s. As you all know, in January, we held a hearing on air race and air show safety in Washington, D.C. Many local entities, like the Reno Air Racing Association, or RARA, as well as the Airport Authority, participated or attended that hearing and are also parties to our accident investigation. Today we're here to talk specifics about the investigation into the September 16th, 2011 crash at the 48th National Championship Air Races and Air Show. As you all know, 10 spectators and the pilot were fatally injured, and over 60 spectators sustained injuries ranging from serious to minor. While we have not completed our accident investigation, we have made significant progress. We believe it's essential to come here to Reno to share with you all what we have learned so far so that the key players who are involved in this event, which we know is so important to Reno and the surrounding community, as well as the larger aviation community, we want to make these recommendations so that those key players can make changes in advance of the races that they're planning for September. I'd like to stress that we know in air racing, just as in other race sports, that there are risks to the pilots. Additionally, there is also some risk to the spectators attending these events. We also understand that the experimental nature of some of these aircraft and that modifications to these aircraft are not necessarily supported by large flight departments or flight test operations. Regardless, we believe that there are changes that can be made to better mitigate the risks of racing at Reno by addressing airworthiness, human factors, and course design. Today I am joined by our investigator in charge, Mr. Howard Plagans, who's with me. Howard and his team were actually, many of the members were on site here at Reno when the accident occurred, and they began their investigation immediately. Many of the investigators who are part of our ongoing investigation are here with me today, and I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize them and ask them to stand. Thank you, gentlemen. With regard to the airplane, the accident airplane, the Galloping Ghost, was a modified experimental P-51D originally manufactured in 1944. The pilot owner bought the airplane with some modifications. He continued to modify it in an attempt to gain speed for the Reno Air Races. The most recent modifications that were performed to the aircraft were done in 2009, and I'm going to talk more about those modifications later. Now to the race course. At the Reno Air Races, the race course is marked with 10 pylons, including the home pylon and 2 additional guide pylons. The unlimited race course is an 8.43-mile circuit and is designed for an average ground speed of 500 miles per hour. With regard to the airport ramp layout, the distance of safety areas from the unlimited race course are calculated based on ground speeds of 550 miles per hour. FAA regulations require 500 feet between the spectators and the show line. which is a line that marks the edge of the race course that is closest to the spectator area. In this photo, you can see the show line in green. There were 8 airplanes in the Unlimited Division Gold Heat. When the accident occurred, the Galloping Ghost was in 3rd place on the 3rd lap of a 6-lap race. The airplane experienced an upset between pylons 8 and 9 and departed the race course area in a helical flight path or corkscrew, which you'll see in a moment when we show the video. The airplane then impacted the box seat spectator area. Our investigation has been aided considerably by videos and more than 500 still photographs that have been provided to our investigative team by the public. We have also benefited from telemetry data from the accident aircraft, which includes altitude, speed, vertical acceleration, heading, and a number of engine parameters. The photos and the videos have aided us in determining time histories of various parameters such as pitch and roll. The following video that I'm going to show shows the accident sequence and was filmed by a spectator in the grandstand. You'll see the video beginning when the airplane is in the straightaway between pylons 6 and 7. So I'm going to talk you through the video so you know what to look for when it plays, because it does happen fairly quickly. As the airplane rounds pylon 8, it rolls sharply to the left, then to the right as it pitches up. At the top of the climb, the airplane rolls to the right until it is inverted and then descends and impacts the box seat area. We will not be showing the impact. However, if anybody would like to look away when the video is showing, I want to give you the opportunity to do that now. So first we're going to show the video at full speed. And then we're going to show it at half speed. And inserted into the half speed video are 2 pauses. And I want to tell you why those 2 pauses are important and what to look for. First pause is where the accident experiences a 1 to 2 second roll upset. And then the second pause is the point in the accident sequence when the elevator trim tab comes off the airplane. Kelly, can you roll the video? Here's the full speed. And here's the half speed. First pause, 1 to 2 second roll upset. Second pause, there's the elevator trim tab coming off. So now I'm going to show you a series of photos that shows the accident sequence in detail. The top number in the lower left-hand corner is the photo number in the sequence. The bottom number in the lower left-hand corner is the elapsed time in seconds from the first photo. The photo sequence begins just prior to the roll upset as the airplane is established in a left turn and approaching pylon 8. In this photo, the airplane appears normal. When zooming in on the left elevator trim tab, we can see that the left trim tab is set trailing edge up as it has been throughout the flight. This observation is important as we progress through the photos. This photo shows the airplane at maximum bank angle of the roll upset, approximately 90 degrees, left wing down. At this point, the elevator trim tab deflections remain consistent with the deflections observed throughout the flight. The left tab is deflected up, and the right tab is locked and fared with the elevator. In this photo, 0.6 of a second after the previous image, it's here where we have the first visual evidence of something abnormal. The airplane is rolling back toward the right and has begun to pitch up. The tail wheel is beginning to extend from its housing. More significantly, the right elevator trim tab, which had been locked and fared until this point, shows evidence of moving to a trailing edge down position. The left elevator trim tab is now slightly trailing edge up, opposite to the right side tab. It is around this point that the airplane is experiencing its highest G load, exceeding the 9G limit of the accelerometer on the aircraft. In this image, less than 0.2 of a second later, the airplane has rolled nearly level and is well established in the pitch-up attitude. The right elevator trim tab has traveled from slightly trailing edge down to a large trailing edge up angle. The left elevator trim tab that had been trailing edge up throughout the race now has trailing edge down displacement, and the tail wheel is nearly fully extended. This image, which is taken from a second camera, shows the airplane near the apex of its climb. As you can see, both trim tabs are still attached. And in the final photo of this sequence, taken approximately 6 seconds after the roll upset began, and only 2 to 3 seconds before the airplane impacts the ground, a piece of the left elevator trim tab separates from the airplane. In summary, the video and photo evidence indicates that the accident sequence began some 6 seconds before the elevator trim tab separated. Now let me address some of the modifications made to the accident airplane, as well as flight testing and technical inspection. The investigative team examined aircraft wreckage and reviewed maintenance records. They examined stock and modified exemplar P-51 aircraft. And they reviewed historical design and flight test data for the P-51. We know that there were extensive modifications for racing made to this airplane over the years. Here's a view of the Galloping Ghost overlaid on top of a stock P-51D. Areas of red indicate the original stock airplane. Structural modifications included reducing the wingspan by approximately 8 feet, from 37 feet to about 29 feet. The flight controls were also significantly modified. The right elevator trim tab was fixed in a fared position, meaning it's aligned with the control surface. The left elevator trim tab was controlled by the pilot through an electric actuator. The airplane had numerous other modifications that could have affected the handling characteristics of the aircraft. We know that the National Air Racing Group Unlimited Division, referred to as the Unlimited Division, requires a structural load analysis, flutter test and analysis, and flight test plan and results for newly built custom aircraft. However, no similar requirement exists for modified fighter aircraft, such as the Galloping Ghost. Our investigators examined the accident aircraft logbook, and those logbooks revealed an entry dated September 22nd, 2009, that stated in part that the prescribed test hours had been completed per the FAA regulation. However, there is no supporting documentation to verify the flight test plans or results or engineering substantiation prior to that September 22nd, 2009 entry in the logbook. Our preliminary examination shows that the accident flight was actually the fastest that the airplane had flown on this course with the greatest G-forces since the aircraft was modified in September 2009. The team is still developing performance models and researching the effects of the airplane modifications on controllability and stability. Now I'd like to turn to the technical inspection that occurred prior to the last air race. All aircraft participating in a run or a race at Reno are required by RARA rules to undergo an inspection by the Technical Inspection Committee of the Unlimited Division. The accident airplane underwent this inspection on September 12, 2011. And based on the checklist, the inspectors found that every item on the list was satisfactory or not applicable, but they did notice two discrepancies which they noted, and those discrepancies were rectified by the crew, and the airplane was approved to fly for the race. Our investigators noted, however, that there is no written procedure or sign-off for discrepancies that are found by the inspection committee. Although we do not believe this was a factor in this accident, we do believe that a tracking mechanism for addressing these discrepancies is a key issue for safety in future air races. I'd now like to turn to the issue of human factors for a few minutes. We know that all pilots who are flying in the air races, particularly in these classes with fast speeds, are subject to the effects of G-forces, which can include incapacitation with a loss of consciousness in extreme circumstances. So let me repeat. Our investigation found that this pilot in this airplane had never flown this fast on this course. While our investigation into the G-force and G-tolerance issues are ongoing, I can tell you that the photographic and telemetry data suggest that both the airplane and the pilot experienced an unanticipated rapid onset of G-forces. Let's talk about what the pilot experienced. We know that immediately following the upset, the airplane experienced G-forces in excess of the 9G limit of the accelerometer that was installed on the aircraft. We also know that the rate of G-force onset to those very high loads took place in less than 1 second. We've studied the pilot seat position using some of the photographic data. So let's look at some more images. This image, taken during a lap previous to the accident lap, shows the normal posture of this pilot. You can see that he's slightly forward, and you can also see his helmet and his shoulder restraints, which are visible. In the next image, which is taken 2 seconds after the initial roll upset, the pilot is no longer visible through the canopy. Now here's another photo, and this was taken while the airplane was inverted. This photo was taken 4 seconds after the roll upset. The pilot can be seen bent forward and leaning to the right. Finally, in this photo, approximately 8 to 9 seconds after the initial roll upset, and just prior to the airplane striking the ground, the pilot is not visible through the canopy. In summary, the photographic evidence, coupled with the telemetry data, appears to support pilot incapacitation. I'd like to now highlight the 6 safety issues that our team has identified to date in our investigation. With spectator exposure and the fatalities and injuries that we saw in this accident, we're concerned about the race course design and layout. We are recommending today that RARA review the current unlimited course layout and consider making changes to lessen the exposure to spectators. As I mentioned, we're also concerned about the lack of a method to track discrepancies that are noted during pre-race technical inspection. To that end, we are recommending that the Unlimited Division develop a system that tracks discrepancies and verifies prior to the race that they have been resolved. We are concerned about the adequacy of structural and aerodynamic review of airplanes that have had major modifications. We have recommended that RARA and the Unlimited Division require owners in the Unlimited class to provide an engineering evaluation or flight demonstrations and analysis within the anticipated air race flight envelope for airplanes with any major modifications. On the day of the accident, the distance from the show line to the spectator areas met the 500-foot requirement for all aircraft as required in the FAA order. However, our investigators reviewed an advisory circular which suggests a distance of 1,000 feet for aircraft flying more than 250 miles per hour. In addition, our investigators found numerous errors within the FAA order, as well as discrepancies between the order and the advisory circular. So we've recommended that the FAA correct the inaccurate and incomplete information and reconcile all of the differences between these two documents. We know that human tolerance to the effects of G-forces is influenced by many variables. We also know that there are ways to improve tolerance through training and repetitive exposure, as well as the use of anti-G suits such as those worn by fighter pilots or other pilots in air races. This is why we've recommended that RARA and the Unlimited class provide G-force training to pilots before the races and evaluate the feasibility of requiring pilots to wear anti-G suits. Investigators identified a fuel truck that was parked in front of the pit area. Although the truck was not a factor in this accident investigation, it does present an unnecessary risk. We are recommending that RARA keep fuel trucks away from the ramp area during race activities. In addition, investigators observed a lack of substantial barriers along the pits and the spectator areas. While the barrier issue was not a factor in this accident, we do believe that injuries as a result of future accidents or incidents could be mitigated by installing more robust and appropriately placed barriers. We are issuing these important safety recommendations today, and we believe if they are implemented, they can improve the safety at the next air race. It is our goal to complete our investigative work, determine the probable cause, and issue any additional recommendations prior to the next air races in September. However, a lot of work remains to be done, and our team is working very hard to complete those activities. Over the next several months, we're going to be correlating additional video and photos from witnesses. We'll be conducting additional studies and performance calculations. We're going to be reviewing regulations and processes, and we're going to be conducting speed and load factor research, among a few things that we're going to be doing. I would really like to express my appreciation to the Airport Authority for helping facilitate this event and for their support through our investigation, as well as all of the parties to our investigation. We've had great cooperation from RARA and many of the other entities that have been a party to our investigation. They participated in our hearing and have worked very closely with our investigators as the factual information has been developed. Finally, I'd like to say thank you to the community. We saw tremendous coordination and support at all levels of this community that really pulled together in the wake of this tragedy. We saw outstanding emergency response from responders throughout the community, at the airport and off the airport. So we do want to recognize that, and we want to thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have for me. For the media who are here, We're happy to answer your questions, but please, before you ask your question, identify yourself by name and your organization. And we also have a phone line with people who are from the media who are calling in as well, and we will ask them to do the same thing. So, any questions from the media who are here? Do we? Yes, sir.
I didn't hear in there what your thinking is on the initial cause. You said something happened 6 seconds before that trim tab separated. What would lead to that cause? And also, what role that you suspect the tail wheel coming down may have played in this, or what does that tell you?
Okay, there were a couple of questions there. The first question had to do with the probable cause determination. Have we determined the cause of the accident? This is an ongoing investigation. We still have a lot of work to do, and so the probable cause will be determined when we issue our final report. We're still performing some analysis and deliberations. This is a very unique aircraft. Again, we don't have a large engineering department that's behind this, and we don't have a lot of other models of this aircraft out there. It's very unique. And so we are looking at the performance characteristics of this aircraft. There was an upset, a very clear upset here, and loss of control. As we've identified from the video and the telemetry data and the photos, that it appears very likely that this pilot was incapacitated at the immediate onset of this upset, because the upset occurred very quickly and the G-forces and the loads were so significant. The second question had to do what was the significance of the tail wheel extending from its housing. That is merely another data point for our investigators to consider. And Kelly, can you please go back to one of the photos, maybe one of the later ones in the sequence with the tail wheel coming out? So, you know, what we can see here is we see some changes occurring that are telling us that there have been some very high loads on this aircraft. The tail wheel is one indication of that coming out. We also talked about the trim tabs and how they had been in a certain position for the race prior to this, and that starts to change here. We also see some structural deformation on the fuselage, and I think, Kelly, if you pull out, you can see it here. So what we're seeing is a lot of very heavy forces on this aircraft and on this pilot, and what we're working on now is to determine exactly what precipitated that. Yes, ma'am. The question was, have we shared this information with the FAA, and what is their response? We have a number of parties to our investigation. The NTSB uses the party system, and the FAA is the only organization that is guaranteed party status on our investigations. And so they do have representatives that have been participating with our technical teams and have access to this information. Today we are issuing that recommendation on the order and the advisory circular guidance to the FAA, and that is being issued now, as are the recommendations to the unlimited class and RARA. So you will have to ask the FAA what their response is.
Are they here?
I do not. I don't know that, but I'm sure our staff can put you in touch with some folks at the FAA.
How likely do you think changing these recommendations are preventing another crash like this? Could they have prevented this crash?
The question is how likely are these recommendations to prevent a future crash, and could they have prevented this crash? That's exactly why the NTSB exists, is to learn from accidents and prevent future accidents. And that is exactly why we're here in Reno making these recommendations at this point, prior to our investigation being completed, because we believe that if implemented, these recommendations can go a long way towards improving safety. I mentioned some recommendations that we did not think were causal to this accident, but I think there are others which are very important to this being prevented in the future. In particular, making sure that aircraft that are highly modified are exposed to the race conditions prior to flying in the race. And if that doesn't happen, you've got to have good engineering analysis and good aerodynamic understanding about what those modifications will mean when this aircraft is operated at high speeds and high loads.
So you think they could have prevented this crash?
The question is, do I think that these recommendations could have prevented this crash? I think that we believe that these recommendations change the playing field to make sure that aircraft, pilots, and the course are safer for future races.
Samantha Colo, Reno Air Racing Association has already started selling tickets for the same box seats where the crash happened. Do you think that this is going to change, or do you think it should change?
The question is that the RARA has already started selling tickets for the box seats, and do I think that this will change? I think what we are most concerned about is that change occurs. We have provided a very good roadmap for how to make some of those changes, and we believe it's very possible to affect these changes prior to September. It's about raising the bar on safety for everyone, for the pilots, the owners, the aircraft, and the organizers. And we think that these recommendations are very common sense, and they can be accomplished before September. But we still are investigating. This is an ongoing investigation, and we could issue additional recommendations as we move to complete this accident investigation. But these ones we think are very important to get out early, and they can affect change immediately. Do we have any questions from the phone bridge?
There are no questions.
Okay. Do we have any last questions from the room? We will make all of these. Oh, yes, sir. Again.
I understand you say that the G-forces on the pilot exceeded 9 Gs. Is there a meter in the cockpit that there's some kind of recording device that tells you that?
The question was, did the G-forces exceed 9 Gs on the aircraft and pilot? The information that we have right now is that the accelerometer had a limit of 9 Gs. We know that that limit was achieved. What we're still trying to work at is how far beyond the limit that might have been. But we know very well that that is at the limit for human beings, and it is very difficult for people to maintain awareness at 5 Gs. 9 Gs is significant. But more importantly is the rapid onset in less than a second of this increased load. A last question from the cameras.
If the audience was 1,000 feet away instead of 500 feet, how much of a difference would that have made on the effect of the
I think we have a photo over here, and Kelly, maybe if you can bring the big one up on the big screens. We've got a picture of the race course in the seating area. The question is if the separation between the spectators and the race course had been increased, what would have been the outcome would have been different in this situation. I don't think that we can say what the outcome would have been. I think what we have talked about in our recommendations is to identify ways to improve the safety for spectators. We talked about race course design. It is possible that that could include increased separation. It could involve other things, such as changing the design of the course and the placement of the pylons, reducing the G-forces coming into the turn or the energy directed to the crowd. It is up to RARA to decide how they can best mitigate the potential risks. And so we've made a recommendation about the race course design. We've also made recommendations about barriers and barrier placement. And so that's another consideration that could move forward. You'll see that the show line in the box seating area met the 500-foot requirement, but I think there are certainly other options as far as setbacks, and that's what we're asking Reno to explore.
Nina Tupper, News 4 Guarantee. You said that the investigation is ongoing, so does that mean more recommendations can continue to come out, or is this going to be the final step for the investigation?
The question was, is this the final step from the NTSB, or is there more action that you can expect? We are still in the process of conducting our analysis in this investigation, and so to complete the investigation, we will issue our final report, the probable cause, and very possibly additional recommendations. And we will see what develops through the course of our work. And we will keep you informed and give you advance notice of that. We are trying to work to complete our report as expeditiously as possible, but it's most important for us to get it right, and we want to take the time to do that. Any questions from the phone bridge?
There are no questions.
Okay, seeing none. Thank you all so much for your attention and for your commitment, and we look forward to continuing to keep you informed as this investigation proceeds. Have a good day.